This is Including You, the new series from Lead at Any Level. Including You features stories from chief diversity officers and other executives who are creating inclusive cultures in their organizations. Our goal is to show what's working in companies just like yours, to give you the tools you need to keep pushing for progress in your own workplace. We want to create belonging and opportunity for everyone, including you. And now here's your host, Amy C. Waninger.
Welcome back to Including You. I'm your host, Amy C. Waninger, the Inclusion Catalyst. But today, I'm the one in the hot seat being interviewed with my collaboration partner and friend, Zach Nunn. Zach, welcome to the show.
Amy, what is going on? Wild. It's my first time being on Including You, but I'm excited to be here. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm glad you're here. And I'm sorry this is the first time.
There's nothing really to apologize for. That's really part of one of your problems. You're always trying to, you dope. You ain't got to apologize for nothing. You know what I'm saying? You ain't do nothing wrong. Okay.
That's fair. That's fair. So can we tell everybody why you're here and what we're celebrating today?
You know what? We're here. We're here for a bunch of reasons, right? But we're celebrating your 100th episode.
100 episodes of Including You.
100 episodes today. Look, I'm so excited and thankful to be in collaboration with you, to be in community with you, to share and be in ecosystem with you. I think about the fact that we've been working together now and known each other now for almost like 6 years. Do you remember how we got connected?
I do remember how we got connected, Zach, because it was a turning point in my career and in my business. So the year was 2018. It was in June. It was right after my first book came out. My first book was Network Beyond Bias. And you contacted me on Twitter and asked me to be on the Living Corporate flagship podcast. And I said, I would love to be on your podcast, but I've never been on a podcast before. What are we talking about? And you said, we're talking about the experiences of Black and brown people in corporate spaces. And I said, oh, in that case, I should probably tell you, because you may not be able to tell from that little tiny Twitter picture, I'm a white lady. And you said, no, it's cool. We're talking about allyship. And I was the guest on episode 6 of the Living Corporate podcast.
Yeah.
And I think from there, I think we've been friends ever since.
Yeah.
And some people don't know this, but this is my second podcast with Living Corporate.
That's right.
The first one we did 70-something episodes of See It to Be It.
That's right.
And then took a little break and came back to this one.
You know what? It's interesting because I remember reaching out to you. I remember us having that conversation in exchange. And like, what I appreciated was I'd done my Googles on you before, right? So I was like, okay, this is a white woman, but she's showing up authentically in this space, in this work. There are enough Black folks around you that had talked to me about you that I felt like you wouldn't embarrass me later. So I was like, let me see what's up. So we get you on the pod. We had a really great pod, right? I'm trying to think what happened that we started the idea of, hey, why don't you get on our network? Like, what was that part looking like? How did that happen?
So you were actually looking for blog posts. You wanted articles for your website. And you asked me, did I know anybody? And I said, I'd be interested. What do you want me to write about? And you said, Black and brown experiences in corporate spaces. And I said, oh, I don't have any of those, but I'll go interview folks I know and I'll talk to them. Mm-hmm. And the article series was to be called See It to Be It. And so what I did was I recorded all those interviews so I could transcribe them and edit them. And then you said, Amy, that's a podcast.
Yeah.
And I think somebody asked me, it was like I was at a conference and somebody asked me like on a Thursday morning, do you have a podcast? And I said, no. And then you and I talked and I went back to them after lunch and I said, oh, actually, I do have a podcast. We've got 26 episodes. It starts next week. And he looked at his watch. He goes, damn, you've been busy.
You know what what I've appreciated about your work, period, as it relates to like just the digital media space is your ability to like platform and really just have really honest conversations about people's jobs, right? Like I think about Living Corporate on the flagship podcast. And for context, Living Corporate, experience management company that prioritizes fairness. We use data analytics and brand storytelling and our own e-learning platform to really create employer trust and market engagement and employee engagement. Like really, we operate in that place, I think. And our podcast is really like that brand storytelling arm But when I think about like Living Corporate's flagship podcast, which we call it Real Talk Tuesdays, it's more like frank, gritty discussion on just like the world and systems of work and reimagining the world of work from fairness. And we're intersecting strategy with blah, blah, blah. And there's space for that. And I'm excited about that flagship. I enjoy about your pod is it's like I read it and I experience it as like a technical deep dive into the actual job. So like you're actually getting a day in the life of that person. Yes, they're going to talk about their background. And yes, they might talk about some like the structural barriers and challenges, and they're really going to emphasize on, hey, here's how my role, here's what the industry looks like. So it's that industry type insight, which again, like we dabble in on like Living Corporate's flagship, but it's not really the same. And so I've enjoyed like just the content that you create. I'm curious, as you think about, we're here at episode 100. I'm curious how you feel about like the future of like the work that you're doing. And also I'd like to understand like, how does your podcast fit into the broader Lead at Any Level ecosystem?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the two podcasts and the transition from one to the other real quick.
Sure.
See It To Be It was really about people's jobs, right? I grew up in Southern Indiana in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Nobody I knew went to college. But after I went to college and I got a job, I could fit in because I looked like the people expected people to look that were there, right?
Yeah.
And I had people pull me aside and say, you probably shouldn't say it that way. You probably shouldn't do this. Don't wear that. I had that because people wanted me to succeed for whatever reason. But I realized that was a privilege that I had, but that lack of exposure was a barrier for me. And the lack of exposure is a barrier for a lot of folks into the world of professional work, but they don't have the privilege of looking like they fit in. And so that whole first podcast, the first 70, however many episodes we did, were really about who are these people in these corporate spaces? What do they do? Let's find some role models that look like the listeners of this show.
Yeah.
And help them even understand these are jobs you may not know exist. And
Yeah.
you can thrive in them if you know what to expect and where to find community. And we did a lot. That was a long series. And then I took a step back and I said, what do I want to do next? And the next really came up. So it's hard sitting here in 2024 to imagine almost 2 years ago, the conversation around DEI wasn't quite as coordinated and it wasn't quite as malicious as it is sitting here in 2024. The backlash conversation around DEI was more DEI doesn't work. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. This isn't helping anyone. Your work doesn't matter, right? Lots of those kinds of narratives coming out in the press, articles on LinkedIn all the time, basically saying, don't waste your time on DEI.
Right.
And I got really frustrated with that because the people that I know that work in diversity and inclusion are making a difference.
Yeah.
Have they changed the whole world? Not yet. But we don't say marketing works because there's a guy in Toledo that didn't buy our product yet. We say, oh, we need more marketing and we need to reach that guy. But for some reason with DEI, if the guy in Toledo isn't on board, we're like, doesn't work, give it up. And I just don't buy that. So I wanted to put something, my thought was, what can I do that creates a counter narrative that adds to this body of work that says, no, this work does matter.
Right.
It does make a difference. Have we solved every problem? No, but we solved this problem for this group in this place. And that's something that can be replicated. And in 100 episodes, I've talked to folks in 100 different places, right? Different industries. I think we've hit just about every industry imaginable. We've been all over the country, talked to folks in different countries as well. And just what's that one thing, that one or two initiatives that they've done that's made a difference in their work? Or that's made a difference in their organization, or that's made a difference for this person in their organization.
Right.
And not only does that give us a counter narrative that says, wait, this can work, it also, I hope, gives the audience something to aspire to, something to inspire them, and maybe a path forward where they've been stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the ground floor narratives and the perspective rather that your content really leans on, right? It's practical, it's approachable. I think about sometimes for me, and I've gotten this feedback for several years of just sometimes it's easy to get heady or so systemic in your analysis that then it's okay, how do I let's like now distill this down into what are tangible actions like this person can do. And sometimes like in my own like just nihilism and pessimism, I might be like, ain't shit you can do. It's over. You know what I'm saying? But when I listen to your content, when I watch your show, it gives me hope that no, there's still like tangible things that like this one leader or person who is not like directly manning the levers of these systems can still do for positive impact that do make like tangible difference in someone's day-to-day life. There's still work and opportunities to get there. When I think about your show, and again, we're on the 100th episode today, is where are you hoping like this content goes, right? Because now you're looking at a fairly substantial library of content. You have a great network of people that you've built over, like, from guests that you've had. What's next? What are you envisioning coming up?
I love how you always push me beyond where I am and where I'm comfortable. And I have to say, I don't think we've captured everything yet. I think there's more work to do right here.
Yeah.
I think that the challenges are always changing. And so the responses to those challenges need to change constantly.
Sure.
And the stories that we're hearing are indicative of and responsive to the changes that are happening in the world. So let me give you just a quick example of an episode that we have coming up. I recorded it earlier this morning with an individual named Josh Miller, and they are an artist who is behind an art installation in Louisville, Kentucky called On the Banks of Freedom. And this art installation is part of a larger project called the Unknown Project. And it is about identifying the names and stories of Black people who were enslaved in Kentucky so that their progeny can find connections to their ancestry. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm in Louisville all the time. I didn't know that art installation existed. I didn't know the impact of it. I didn't know the work that was behind it. And those kinds of stories are not ones that we're hearing about on our local news or in our classrooms. And so these are things that matter, right? They matter to the people that they impact, but they matter to the community. They matter to the shared history that we have. I've got others coming up about co-creation, beliefs and relationships. I'm just like looking down the list.
Yeah.
I've got someone who just said, look, we manage to 3 inclusive behaviors in our organization. Our leaders are held accountable to just 3 inclusive behaviors. And if they execute on those 3 inclusive behaviors, we know we're building the culture we need. And so it's right. It's not always let's boil the ocean, let's solve every problem, right? In fact, I know how theoretical you are and how big you think. And I think with my feet, I think with my feet first, right? Like, where am I going? And then I'll figure out what I'm going to do when I get there.
Yeah.
And so I think this show is the balance of those two, right? It really comes down to what's the next step someone can take.
No, and it's just, that's why I'm just so appreciative of the network and like the broader team and community that like we've built to live in corporate, because you're absolutely right. Like I'm probably over obsessed with the future and over obsessed with scale and scoping and blah, 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 blah. And that's great. Like in context and balance of having other people who go, great. I see you're looking at the top of the mountain. Have we thought about what we're going to plan for at the base and what gear we want to put on and we have enough oxygen tanks and blah, blah, blah. I think we talked about 2018 again, and you're right, in June, it'll be 6 years of us working together, of us being in partnership, collaboration, and et cetera, et cetera. How have you changed, if at all, in these past 6 years?
Oh my gosh, I have learned so much. When I wrote my book, I wrote it with all of the experience, but also all of the naivete that I had in the moment, right? Which is what we do. That's how we live our lives, right? Just the balance of experience and naivete from wherever we are. And I think I've learned a little bit more about how to navigate in this space. I've learned a little bit more about discernment working with you, because I've learned that there are people who are not intended in this space. There are people who are not here for the right reasons, if you will, and don't always show up in the way that I think they intend to. And I'm sure that I've done that as well. I'm sure that I've shown up in ways that did not match my intentions. But I've also learned that there are plenty of folks, rightfully, who are skeptical of me and my intentions and what I bring, and am I serious about this work? And I used to really struggle with that, and I've come to a place where I accept and embrace that, because it's an opportunity for me to prove to myself that I'm here for the right reasons, and to just keep living in my own integrity, and keep doing the work every day, not for kudos, not for pats on the back, not to have doors open for me, but because the work matters to me.
To your point, let's just name it right here. Yeah, like you're a white woman in these spaces of employee fairness and DEI and HR, and you think about like historically, now not at the most senior positions, but typically at the positions that most marginalized people exchange, most HR people or people in these spaces are white women. And there's been a plethora of white women who created harm in corporate spaces. Shoot, I can name like 5 right now. I ain't gonna wake up your show like that, but I could. Okay. But I think to your point, it's you and I had a conversation off mic about a person who I won't name here, who like had a breakdown with me over for an hour on the phone because they couldn't even grasp the idea that I did not necessarily trust them, and that they don't show up, and they have not, and they do not consistently show up in alignment with what they say, right? Like the impact versus what their stated intentions are often incongruent, right? And to your point, though, I agree that the only thing you can really do is honor your own values, be a person of integrity, show up and be consistent. And I can say truly, and there's a very short list. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's a very short list of white folks I trust. I do not. But like it's 5 people, right? It's 5 people. You're on that list. There's not anyone I've ever met who I can say has been as consistent, authentic. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. I ask you for feedback, you give it to me. You're encouraging. And okay, what does an ally look like? And beyond even like framing it as in the context, Alex, just what's a good business partner look like? What does a good person, a high integrity person look like? Amy, you're up there, one of those people I think about. I'm really appreciative of your work here. This is takes diligence to even like facilitate all these conversations. I'm excited about, to your point, about the growth that happens over time. You can't help but grow in talking to all these people, hearing all these stories. And if you're not receiving some level of conviction or challenge from all these really dynamic stories and experiences that you're hearing from like real human beings and not like these polished whatever, but actual people, there's probably something wrong with you. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk a little bit about, I think about Lead at Any Level. There's a lot of work that y'all are doing over there. You got a lot of things going on. What are you most excited about as you think about Lead at Any Level, the work that you're doing with your clients, as you look towards like the next like 12 months? Like what gets you most hopeful? And
the history of Lead at Any Level has been a pretty steady but slow march toward where we are now. It was just me, and I was speaking at conferences, and then I started getting invited to speak at corporations, and for a long time as one and dones in companies. This year in 2024, we've really turned a corner where we've got some long-term contracts with some very big names, none of which I can name right now, as you know how contracts work. But we're going to start seeing not just the immediate impact of the work that we do, but the long-term impact of the work that we do. We're going to be able to start collecting case studies about longer journeys and bigger impacts and deeper connections with these organizations. Just coming into this year, we have 3 multi-year contracts with some pretty big companies. And so that's exciting to me from the client standpoint of really getting to know the folks in these organizations, really getting to understand their challenges, their aspirations, and how we can close those gaps. But the other piece of this behind the scenes piece that people may not be seeing yet, unless they're on my mailing list, is I've expanded my team, and I have 13 folks on my team now, besides just me, that are in delivery mode. So so this has been, and finding the right people and the right mix of people, and it's a really diverse group. It's so exciting to me to see everybody bring something a little bit different to the work, not just in terms of the work that they do, but their perspectives, their backgrounds, the theoretical framework that they work from. everybody comes at this from just a little bit different lens. And so the exciting thing for me from then a client standpoint, going back to that, is when a client comes to me and says, this is the problem that we have, and here's who we're trying to reach, and here's what we've tried, or here's what we're concerned about, I'm very likely to have the right mix of not just skills, abilities, and strengths, but also lived experience and perspective to match up with that client and their needs. And so this is becoming a really exciting time. And all I'm gonna say is if you haven't been watching, look out, because we're coming
Hey,
in full force in 2024.
let's
This is gonna
go.
be the year of very rapid growth and really exciting results for our clients and for us, frankly, because we're getting to know each other better. We're getting to learn from each other, and that elevates us all.
You know what, Amy? Look, I don't know what else to say besides I got mad love for you. I'm appreciative of the fact that we've been again like rocking for a while. Congratulations on 100 episodes. I'm gonna see you back here at 200. You know what I'm saying? And maybe I'll be around before then, so it's not like I'm popping up like a ghost behind the scenes. If it isn't apparent by now, Living Corporate, of course, supports and loves everything that you're doing. We're so honored that we're able to promote and amplify your podcast through our network. Excited about all the work that you got going on. And shoot, you probably should come back to Real Talk Tuesday sooner too.
Yeah, that sounds good. And Zach, I want to congratulate you because I don't know if all the listeners know this. I don't hear
So
you talking about it near enough,
what's up?
but Living Corporate is in the top 1% of all podcasts globally.
You know what? It's so funny. You're right. I don't talk about that.
1%.
No, you're right. You're right. I don't talk about that a lot. And I appreciate that. Thank you for slowing me down and giving my flowers. I think you know what, Amy, is I don't so the numbers are the numbers matter, right? Because you don't want to say the numbers don't matter because the numbers they matter within certain contexts. I think because I'm just so focused on like the actual stories and building real impact and like touching real clients, right? I get excited more about the campaign we did with Pfizer and the Hispanic Heritage Month spotlight we did with Amazon and the ongoing work we're doing with Textio and our partners at Capgemini. And I'm excited about Amplify Credit Union with Angela Shaw. I'm excited about the tangible things, the ways that we're touching people. But you're right. Living Corporate's podcast is top 1% listened, and it's a huge market, right? But I'm appreciative of that. And I'll say what that teaches me is that there really isn't failure as long as you don't give up, right? If you're consistent and you keep going, you're not going to fail because eventually you're going to see return against your investment. It's just how long are you willing to work? When you think about podcasting specifically, I think like the world, there's this assumption like when people go, when you hear podcasts and they say, this podcast is brought to you by, and they insert some brand, that's a big pod. Like that's like a huge pod. Like Live Corporate, we do those from time to time, right? That our model doesn't really, we don't like. But my point is like everybody thinks that that's the norm. It's not the norm. Like it's just not. Like it takes. There are people who they might get like 50 to 100 downloads a day, but it might take them a year of consistent marketing and publishing of weekly content to even get to those numbers. I mean, you and I've had these conversations behind the scenes like for years, right? That's why I'm just so impressed by you because I remember when we first got started, your podcast was not even popping. And so it takes time and it's hard for people. It feels like you're just talking into the ether. Then you look up and you don't feel like you have anything to show for it. And so what you focus on the beginning is what is important to focus on once you hit that goal, which is who am I actually impacting? Who am I touching? We just got a message last week from somebody on LinkedIn. And I meant to tell you this, Amy, who said, man, I've stumbled across Living Corporate. I Googled experiences at work or something like that. And I stumbled across y'all's website. And then I found y'all on Apple Podcasts. I found y'all on Spotify. I had no idea you had all this content. I love the Including You series. I love the Real Talk Tuesday. Thank you so much. And so that's the kind of stuff that gets me like really excited. Yo, can I get 30 more of those? Yeah, we got 100,000+ downloads a month. That's great. Super thankful for that. Can I get 50 more of that? Right? Can I get some more reviews of people talking about how this helped them navigate? That's the thing. You know what I'm saying?
That's
Speaking of
right.
which, Make sure y'all give Amy, y'all listen to this talking about episode 100. Y'all need to make sure y'all give Amy 5 stars in the review on Apple Podcasts, straight up.
Now, we used to do this thing, remember, where we talked about the 6-star review. Six-star review is not just a 5-star review. It's a 5-star review plus a comment,
plus
a couple sentences on how much you loved the episode, because that's what helps people find the show.
That's a really good
people who haven't heard it yet, and then they can be the ones to slide into Zach's DMs and tell him how powerful this work is.
Come on, Amy. Look, I appreciate you. Thank you for letting me put you in the hot seat. Before we let you go, any last words or shout outs? And I'll give you the show back.
Oh, sure thing. So, Zach, first of all, I want to say thank you for including me in this amazing ecosystem that you've built. You're phenomenal, and I consider it an honor and a privilege to be here, and I hope that I continue to earn this space. I think the world of you, and I see amazing things in your past, present, and future, and I'm just excited to be a part of it, even if it's just from the wings. Like, I love watching you work, and I love watching you move in the world. I want to say thank you to all of my amazing guests. Some of the folks that have been on the show, I got to tell you, have just been phenomenal. Knock my socks off kind of folks. And I got more coming. Don't go anywhere. You're going to be right back here next week for the next episode.
Peace.
If you've enjoyed this episode, follow Lead at Any Level on LinkedIn and YouTube. Then join us for Including You video simulcast every Thursday at noon Eastern. Including You can also be enjoyed each week as part of the Living Corporate audio podcast series, available on all major podcast platforms. Learn more at living-corporate.com. Including You is brought to you in part by Lead at Any Level, a boutique training and consulting firm improving employee engagement and retention for companies that promote from within. Lead at Any Level. Leaders can be anywhere and should be everywhere. Learn more at leadatanylevel.com. Lead at Any Level and its logo are registered trademarks of Lead at Any Level, LLC. The views and opinions of guests on our show do not necessarily reflect the positions of Lead at Any Level, Living Corporate, or the sponsors of Including You.